Hello, my name is Rickard, and in this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to recreate this eternity poster from 824. I recently saw this film poster and I thought it'd be a great opportunity to show you how to create a step and repeat effect inside of Photoshop. If you want to follow along, I have included all the assets that I use in a link in the description of this video. So go ahead, download those, and then let's dive into Photoshop. All right, I'm going to go to New File, and here I'm going to change this to pixels, and I want a document that's 2000 pixels wide by 3120 pixels tall. I want this to be 72, and everything else I'll leave the same and hit Create. Next thing I want to do is just set up a blue background for our sky. So let's go ahead and go to Solid Color. And here I'm going to type in the color that I want, which is 48A8D8. So that's just a kind of blue, sky blue background color. And we can call this layer Sky. Next thing I want to do is set up some guides. So let's go to View, Guides, New Guide Layout. And I want 4 columns with no gutter. And for the rows, I want 5 columns with no gutter. And then I'm also going to add some margin at the top, 160, none on the left, and then 134 on the bottom, and none on the right. Let's go ahead and hit OK there. Next thing I want to do is add some clouds to this scene. So I'm going to add a new layer, and we'll call this Clouds. And I'm going to do this with some brushes. So I'm going to go to my brush tool here, make sure my foreground color is white, and then if I right mouse click, I see all my brush options. Now I've already loaded my Nucly cloud brushes. If you don't already have these, I will include a link where you can buy them. And if you don't want to buy the full set, I will include the specific ones I use for this tutorial in the free asset download. But I highly recommend getting this set. It's great for when you need to add a very photorealistic cloud to your scene. So for this, I want one in the background that looks like it has a sun behind it. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this one here. And then I want to look at this, but if I click, it's going to add the cloud. So in order to get rid of this box, I can hold down Command, click, and now I can see where this is going to place. Now in the final composition, I do want my sun to be right about there. So when I add this, I want there to be a point of cloud right about there, where presumably the sun can be poking out of. All right, I'm going to right mouse click and then grab some different clouds here. And I want to add these down here. So maybe there and maybe there. And then I'm going to right mouse click again, grab one more set of clouds here. Maybe these ones here. I'm going to go ahead and make this one a tiny bit smaller. Not quite that small. So something like this. Maybe some here. And then maybe some hints of clouds that I can use kind of just in this top corner here. So there you go. I've got my nice cloud background. Maybe I'll add one more down here, a little bit bigger. And I'm pretty happy with that. All right, next thing we're going to do is bring in our people or our characters. I'm going to go to File, Open, and inside the assets, I've included this generated image PSD. This is an image I generated in ChatGPT. We're going to use this, but because it's generated by AI, there is one thing that we're going to have to fix first, which is the fact that the bench here kind of disappears behind them. And I also want to separate them from the background and also create a nice shadow layer that we can have sitting on top of our clouds. So we're going to do all that. First thing is I'm going to do Command J to make a new layer. And from this, I want to go to my Select Subject or Object Selection tool. I want to make sure this is on Rectangle up here. And then I'm just going to click and drag around the bench and the 3 people on it. And there you can see the selection that Photoshop made. It's quite good already. I'm going to hit Q just so I can see it as a mask, and that'll make it a little clearer what we need to fix. So we can zoom in here. You can see that it missed some of our hair. And here I'm just going to go to my brush tool, right mouse click, go to one of my general brushes here, and then I can adjust the brush dynamically, holding down Option and Control. And then we can adjust going up and down the hardness or feather of the brush, and then left and right the size of the brush. And here with black, I'm just going to paint the parts that the selection missed. And I'll just go around the image and do that real quick. And then I can hit X, and that'll switch my two colors here. And then I can paint out the parts that it should not have selected. And I can toggle between the two colors by just hitting X, and that'll allow me to select or deselect in my mask here. Okay, so that looks good. I'm going to hit Q again to get out of quick mask mode, and then add a mask here. And then I'm going to take this background here, and I want to select this part of the bench right here. I'll just go from there to about there. And then with my background layer, I'll do Command J to put that on its own layer. And then just going to move this so that it's behind right there, then do Command T, hold down Shift, and drag this to there. So now we have that bench appearing where it needs to be. It's obviously the wrong color here. To fix that, I'm just going to go into my eyedropper tool with I on my keyboard. Make sure this is on 5x5. Select the color of the bench here. Add a new layer. Hold down Option to clip it to this part. And then go onto my gradient. I want to make sure I'm on classic gradient, so I'm just adding pixels, not creating a new layer. And then here I want to go under basic, foreground to transparent, and make sure I'm on linear. And then I'm just going to go like this so that it has that color going back toward there. And then I can take these three layers here and do Command E, and that'll merge them all together into one layer that is my subjects and the bench all together in one layer. Okay, next I'm going to take this, do Command J one more time, and we're going to call this shadow. We can also call this subject. And for my shadow layer, I basically want to take the shadows that are being cast onto this ground here and make them transparent, meaning get rid of the white behind them. So to do that, I'm going to first get rid of any color on the layer, and I can do that with Image Adjustments, Black and White. And then after that, I'm going to do Command M for curve. And here what I want to do is pull down the bottom of my curve to make this shadow even stronger, but then pull up the top of my curve toward white so that we're getting rid of any gray in the whites. I'm going to go to about there and then hit OK. Now there is still gray here, and I need to get rid of that. So to do that, I'm going to go back onto my gradient tool, and if I hit D on my keyboard, it's going to default my colors to black and white, and then X will make my foreground color white. Now because I'm already on this foreground to transparent, I now have a white to transparent gradient. I'm going to start at this edge and then kind of go toward the bench. And then here I want to start from about where they're sitting down to about there. And then here from this edge toward the bench. And then just to be on the safe side, we'll also do the bottom there. All right, so now we have everything in our back layer fading to white. Now what I can do is turn off our subject layer, go to my channels, hold down Command and click on the thumbnail. And then I can invert this selection, make a new layer, and we'll call this shadow. And then I'm going to fill this selection with black. So if black is my foreground color, I can do Option Delete. Oops. Option Delete. And now I have this on its own layer. So you can see I now have a shadow with transparency that I can drag into my other document. So let's unhinge this or unhook it there. I'm going to take these two layers together and then just drag them into this document. I'm going to do Command T for transform and transform this down to 54%. And I want her face to basically kind of where her mouth is should be right about in the center guide there. So right about there. All right, now what I want to do is the kind of transforming backwards effect that you see in the original poster. Okay, so I'm going to hold down Option and make a second copy, and we can call this copy. And then I'm going to do Command T for transform. I want to take my anchor point here, and if you don't see that anchor point, go ahead and turn it on with this check mark up here. And I'm going to drag this up right to the cross point of these two guides right there. And then in here, I'm going to put 76. So that way it's shrinking, but it's shrinking toward this anchor point. Then I'm going to do Shift, Option, Command, and T. And you can see what that's doing. It's making a copy while also transforming it the same amount as the last one. We're going to keep doing this until it kind of goes off into the distance, just like that. Now you can see that the effect looks really weird because these should be on top of each other, but they're not. So what I'm going to do is hold down Shift, get to the bottom copy there, then go to Layer, Arrange, and Reverse. And now you can see that effect is happening quite nicely there. Now, the other thing I do want to do here is I want this to have a little more contrast, but I primarily want that in my foreground copy here. So I'm going to do Command M, kind of bring down my blacks here, bring up the highlights, and maybe just do an S curve. So this looks a little more illustrative to have that kind of poster effect. And then for the second copy here, I'm going to do Shift, Command, and M. That'll bring up that curve. And I'm going to make it not quite as strong as the last one. And then maybe bring up the white point just a tiny bit. All right, then I'm going to go to the next copy down, do Option, Command, and M one more time. And here I'm going to bring up my white point even more, just so that this starts to kind of fade into the background. We're going to do that with our next copy. This one will go even more. And then we'll do that with our next copy down and our next copy down and our next copy down. All the way to our last one here. Okay, then the next thing I want to do is get rid of the shoes on this version. So if we go to our first copy here, that's the one with the shoes. Just going to add a mask to that, go onto my gradient, make sure my foreground color is black, and then just add a gradient that goes up from there. And then I also want to add a stronger shadow under here. So to do that, I'm going to go to my elliptical marquee, just hold down Option and kind of make a circle right there, and then go to here, add a solid color. Because my foreground color is black, it's going to make my solid color layer black. And then I'm going to double click on the mask to bring up the properties and then add some feather here. So right about there. And then I can take the opacity on this down just a bit. Okay, so I'm liking that so far. The one other thing I want to do is add just a white glow right over here that's kind of behind, but also a little bit in front of this so that they're going off into that glow. So I'm going to add a new layer and we'll call this front glow. And for this, I'm going to go back onto my gradient tool with G on my keyboard. I want to keep this on classic gradient, but I want to put it on radial, and then I'm going to hit X so that white is my foreground color. And then I'm just going to hold down Shift from that point. And there you can see now that's just dragging out. I'm going to hold down Option and drag this layer so that it is at the bottom, right above our shadow layer there. And then do Command T and make this a bit bigger so that we get that kind of overall glow in our background. So I'm happy with that. Next thing we need to do is add some titles to this. What we can do now is we can take all these layers that make up our artwork and do Command G to put them in a group, and we can call this artwork. And then we can add a new layer here and we can call this titles. And the first title we'll do is the black names at the top. So let's zoom in here and let's do the middle one first here. I'm going to go onto the type tool. I'll change my foreground color to black and then just click right here. I want this to be centered. And let's go ahead and add the first name. We'll do Elizabeth Orion. And for the last name, I'm going to make it all caps, making this slightly different from the original, just so I don't get in trouble. I'm going to do Command A to select all that type, and I'm going to use the not Google font, the Adobe font called the Wayfinder CF. So if you don't have that already, you can just download it from Adobe by clicking on here to get to your Adobe fonts. It's called Wayfinder CF and regular. I'm going to make this 56 and then bring up my character palette here. I want this to be 72. And then for the Orion only, I want to change this to 90. So just like that. And then we're going to move this down so that it's centered on this guide and just at the bottom of that top guide there. And then we can hold down Option, drag this to that guide there, and then we can change this to Mark Telling. And then we can hold down Option one more time, drag it to this guide here, and we'll change this to California Turner. Okay, and then for the tagline, we're going to hold down Option, drag this to here. It's using the same font, so I can just select this and say you. This one we don't want to be all caps. You can only choose one. I'm going to select all. Now, when you're in the type tool, Command T does not bring up transform. Instead, it brings up your character palette, which is what I want here. And for this, I want it to be 74 pixels. And we're going to do this at -22. Just like that. And then we'll just move this maybe to about there. That looks good. And then I'm going to hold down Option one more time, drag this to this bottom guide, and we'll type in coming soon. And for the coming soon, I'm going to get rid of this strong tracking and maybe make this 80. Okay, and then the last one is our big eternity title. So hold down Option again, just drag this up. And here we'll type in eternity. I'm going to Command A to select all of it. I'm going to change this to really large. It's going to be 500 pixels. And for this, we'll keep it at -22 again. And for the color, I'm going to use FFCC01. So that's kind of a warm yellow color. And I do want this to kind of stand out from the background a bit. So I'm just going to add a drop shadow to it here. And let's go ahead and reset this to the default drop shadow. I'm going to keep the distance at 0 and just increase the size until you don't see the drop shadow, but it's just a bit darker behind the character, and I'm going to turn this up to about 80. All right, that's looking really good. I'm going to do Command semicolon so we can see what our poster is looking like overall. Pretty happy with it. The one other thing I might want to do is just add some film grain and also do a slight kind of overall color grade on top of the whole thing. I do feel like our characters are a little bit on the yellow side. So let's go, and at the top of the artwork, I'm going to go ahead and add a curve layer. And I'm going to go to my blues and just bring up the bottom there. That's going to get rid of some of that yellow. And maybe pull it back down in our highlights. So just like that. And then maybe in my RGB, I also want to just pull up our darks a little bit there. Kind of a inverted S curve. So something like this. And then the other thing I want to do is add a film grain on top of the whole thing. My favorite way to add film grain is using Camera Raw. So I'm going to first add just a layer. We can call this film grain. And I want to fill this layer with 50% gray. So we'll just add 50% gray here. That'll make it our foreground color, and we can do Option Delete to fill that whole layer, or Option Backspace. And then I'm going to go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And this will bring up our Camera Raw settings. And we're going to go under Effects and add Film Grain. If we zoom in here, we can see how that is looking. And the great thing about using Camera Raw is I have this roughness setting, and I can take that down, which will give us some slightly more realistic film grain look. So something like that. And then we can put this on linear light. Now that's going to be way too strong, but you can see how nice of an effect it is. I can take the fill down here probably to around 15 or 20. That's going to be enough to give us a really nice film grain. One last thing I might want to do just to give this a little bit more of an illustrated look is turn off our titles and our film grain. And just above the artwork here, I'm going to add a new layer. We can call this Sharpness. I'm going to do Shift, Option, Command, and E to merge everything onto that layer. And then go to Filter, Other, High Pass, and put this on 2 pixels. And then put this on linear light as well. It might be too strong, but you can see it kind of gives it more of an illustrated look. And I'll take the opacity or the fill on this down to 30%. And you do want to change the fill when you're using linear light, not opacity. Let's go ahead and turn on our titles and turn on our film grain. So there you have it. That's how you recreate that poster in Photoshop, and hopefully through this you learned some tips, tricks, and techniques that you can use in your own projects. Now, if you enjoyed this tutorial, please subscribe to my channel, turn on your notifications, leave a like, leave a comment on what other posters you'd like me to recreate in Photoshop. And also, if you want to get my full pack of clouds, 3 of which we used in this project, I'll include a link to that in the description of this video. Otherwise, here's some other tutorials that you can check out, and I will see you next time.